didn't realize my words hurt him. Now he's gone, and I regret it. Hello, Reddit. I'm using a throwaway account because I do not want this associated and connected with my main account, as my friends follow me on my main account, and I wouldn't like this getting out yet. My name is Vivian, and my husband, let's call him Matthew. I am 33 years old, and Matthew is 32. We've been married for about 4 years, but we started dating as far back as when we were in college. We clicked almost instantly. Our connection was undeniable, and everyone around us could see it. Things have always been pretty great between us, apart from some issues, namely, the fact that my husband can never really take a joke or listen to any criticism. Now, I know I might sound like the bad person here, and I'm not trying to undermine or dismiss my husband's feelings. But it has always bothered me that he gets so upset whenever I try to joke about certain things or give him constructive feedback. To me, it's something every person should be able to handle. Taking a joke or a bit of criticism should be normal. I mean, I never meant to hurt him. When I made these comments, I genuinely thought I was helping him see things from a different perspective, or just lightening the mood with some humor. But instead of seeing it that way, Matthew would often get angry or shut down completely. I thought he was being overly sensitive, that he just needed to toughen up and learn how to take things in stride. Looking back now, I realize how wrong I was. I'm sorry. I didn't know how much my words were affecting him, and by the time I did, it was too late. Like I said before, things were so good in the beginning. We shared such a beautiful love, and our communication was top-notch. We have a kid together, a 6-year-old. I'm a stay-at-home wife and mom, and Matthew works and pays the bills. It was a dynamic that worked well for us, or at least I thought it did. I realized that I made Matthew completely shut down. Back then, when I would usually tease him or criticize him, he would get angry. He would try to defend himself, maybe snap back at me, or just walk away to cool off. But now things were different. Instead of reacting, he would just shut down. He wouldn't laugh or even respond. His eyes would glaze over, and it was like he wasn't even there anymore. I didn't notice it quick enough. I thought that maybe he had finally learned to take a joke, that he had toughened up and was now able to handle my bluntness without getting upset. I even convinced myself that this was a sign of growth in our relationship, that we had reached a point where we could joke about anything without it causing issues. But I was wrong. So wrong. Looking back now, I see how mistaken I was. I used to take pride in being blunt, in saying things as they were without sugarcoating anything. I thought it was a strength, a way to keep things real in our relationship, but now I understand that there's a fine line between being blunt and being rude or cruel, and I crossed that line more times than I can count. I would make what I believed to be harmless jokes or sarcastic comments, not realizing the damage they were causing. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. Even I realize how horrible I've been, how cutting, how insensitive. I would mock Matthew about everything. I would talk about his financial situation, something that I knew was a sore spot for him. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and Matthew is the sole breadwinner. He didn't make as much money as I would have hoped or expected. We lived comfortably, but we didn't have the kind of luxurious lifestyle that some of our friends did. And instead of appreciating what we had, I would make snide remarks about how other men in our circle were more successful, how they could afford nicer houses, fancier cars, more extravagant vacations. I would say things like, "It must be nice to have a husband who can actually provide," or, "I wish we could afford that, but I guess we'll just have to settle for less." I said these things, thinking they were just jokes, not realizing how deeply they were cutting him. I would even make fun of his physical appearance, despite the fact that there was nothing to complain about. Matthew was a good-looking man, tall, fit, with kind eyes and a warm smile, but I would still find things to criticize. Maybe his hair was thinning a bit, or he had gained a few pounds, or he wasn't dressing as sharply as he used to. I would make comments about it, saying things like, "You're not as young as you used to be," or, "You should really hit the gym more often." I thought I was being playful, but I was really just chipping away at his confidence, bit by bit. I didn't even just stop there. Stupid me, not realizing just how much I was hurting my partner. Even when Matthew tried to talk to me about how my comments were affecting him, I didn't listen. I remember the time he sat me down and told me that he didn't appreciate the things I said about his physical appearance. He said that my comments made him self-conscious, that they made him start believing I was no longer attracted to him. I still dismissed him. I told him that he needed to toughen up, that I was just joking, and that it was all in good fun. I couldn't believe how ridiculous he was being. I would wonder why he couldn't just take a joke. I even told him it was disturbing how he just couldn't stand a bit of teasing. I told him that joking was a normal part of life, and he had to get used to it, get over it. I was so blind. I couldn't see how much I was chipping away at his self-esteem. Instead of supporting him, I was tearing him down, and I didn't even realize it. It wasn't just his appearance that I made fun of. I would even make jokes about his emotional sensitivity. Matthew was a caring, empathetic man, someone who wasn't afraid to show his emotions. But instead of appreciating that, I would call him too sensitive and weak. I would make fun of him for crying during movies, for expressing how he felt about things, for being too soft. I thought it was funny to call him out for being less manly than I thought he should be. I saw his emotional needs as a sign of weakness, not realizing that I was the one who was weak for not being able to meet him where he was. I also made fun of what I perceived to be his lack of ambition. I would frequently tease him for not being driven enough, for not climbing the corporate ladder as fast as I thought he should be. I would constantly compare him to more successful men we knew, asking him why he couldn't be more like them. I implied that he was lazy, that he lacked direction. Every time he did something kind or went out of his way to help someone, I would mock him. I'd call him a simp, a pushover, saying he was too eager to please. I couldn't see his kindness for what it was, a strength. Instead, I saw it as a weakness, something to be ridiculed. Even his social awkwardness wasn't off limits. Matthew wasn't the most outgoing person. He could be shy and uncomfortable in social situations, but instead of helping him, I would joke about it. I'd call him awkward, socially inept. I'd make fun of how he didn't know how to network or how he might embarrass me in front of our friends or his colleagues. I thought I was being funny, but I was really just highlighting his insecurities and making them worse. Now I can see how cruel I was. I was so wrapped up in my own insecurities and frustrations that I didn't realize how much I was hurting him. I didn't understand how much damage my words were doing until it was too late, until he had already shut down, and until he was gone. And now, all I can do is regret. Regret the things I said, the things I did, and how I took his love and kindness for granted. I didn't see it at the time, but I was so wrapped up in my own frustrations, my own desires for something more, that I didn't realize what I was doing to him. I didn't realize that I was making him feel like he wasn't enough, like he would never be enough, no matter what he did. And the worst part is, I didn't realize it until it was too late, until he was already gone. It wasn't until recently that I finally noticed how much my words and behavior had driven a wedge between us. At first, the signs were subtle, small things that I easily dismissed. Matthew started giving me the cold shoulder more often, or he'd make snide comments under his breath. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the stress from work weighing on him. I assumed it was just a rough patch, something that would pass with time. But as time went by, the distance between us became more apparent. However, I didn't notice the change immediately. It took me far longer than it should have to realize that something was truly wrong. I was so wrapped up in my own world that I failed to see how much Matthew was pulling away. He had become very distant, almost like a stranger living in our home. Conversations that used to flow easily between us became awkward. I began to notice that he no longer confided in me about his day or shared his thoughts and dreams like he used to. He stopped initiating conversations, and when I tried to talk to him, his responses were brief and detached. It was as if he was building a wall between us, brick by brick, and I was too blind to see it happening. At night, instead of cuddling up together on the couch to watch our favorite shows, he would retreat to another room, saying he needed some space. I told myself it was just a phase, that he was tired and needed time to recharge. But I should have known something had shifted. Even our intimacy in the bedroom suffered. I remember one evening we were sitting at the dinner table and I made yet another offhand joke about his job, expecting him to laugh it off like he used to. But instead, he just stared at his plate, his face expressionless, and mumbled something about needing to finish some work. He didn't even look at me as he got up and left the table. I felt a bit guilty, but I quickly pushed it aside and convinced myself that he was just in a bad mood. As the distance grew, so did my frustration. I didn't understand why he was acting this way, why he was pulling away from me. I started to feel resentful. I thought that he was the one creating problems in our marriage. I told myself that if he would just toughen up and stop being so sensitive, things would go back to the way they were. But now, I realize how wrong I was. Matthew wasn't the one creating the distance. I was. My constant mocking, the jokes that I thought were harmless, the criticisms that I believed were just me being honest, they were all pushing him away. Each time I made a sarcastic remark or belittled his efforts, I was chipping away at his self-esteem in our relationship. And by the time I finally noticed the space between us, it was too late. The damage had already been done, and I have no idea how to fix it. The breaking point finally came for Matthew, and looking back, I can't say I didn't see it coming. We had been planning to buy a house, something we had both been really excited about for ages. House hunting was supposed to be fun, but instead it became this huge source of arguments. I kept wanting to look at homes way above our budget. I insisted that we at least look at them, just to see what was out there. Matthew, on the other hand, was realistic. He kept telling me that we just couldn't afford those kinds of houses, and that looking at them was only setting ourselves up for disappointment. He tried time and time again to explain to me that we simply couldn't afford the houses I wanted to see. He told me there was no point in looking at something we couldn't realistically buy. But I didn't listen. I should have been more understanding, should have seen where he was coming from. But I didn't. Instead, I got angry. I was frustrated that he wasn't willing to even consider the kind of house I wanted. So, in a moment of irritation, I made a snarky comment that if only he had a better paying job, like some of our friends, then we wouldn't have to worry about the budget. I'll never forget the look on Matthew's face when I said that. It was like I'd slapped him. He seemed really hurt, more hurt than I'd ever seen him. For the first time, I realized my words had really done some damage. It wasn't just a harmless joke. I had really cut him deep. I tried to apologize right away, but it was too late. Matthew didn't accept it. He just kind of shut down and ignored me for the rest of the day. He wouldn't talk to me about anything except our son. Over the next few days, Matthew became even more withdrawn. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only out of necessity. I tried to downplay the situation in my mind, telling myself that he just needed some time to cool off, that things would eventually blow off and go back to normal. Then, 3 days ago, Matthew finally sat me down and told me we needed to talk. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that scared me. He told me that he needed space from me, that he couldn't keep living like this. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I was hearing. I got upset. I told him he was overreacting and that we could just work through it like we always had. I pleaded with him to talk to me, to explain what he meant by needing space, but he wouldn't engage. He just quietly packed a to-go bag, gathered a few essentials, and then left while I stood there, frozen in place. It was like a bad dream. I kept staring at the door, waiting for him to come back and tell me it was all a mistake or a prank. But he didn't. He was gone, and for the first time, I truly understood the gravity of what I had done. I feel so lost and confused right now, and I'm at a complete loss for what to do next. I never thought it would come to this, but here I am, trying to figure out how to make things right after making so many mistakes. I keep replaying everything in my head and wondering where I went wrong and how I can fix it. I know I messed up. I know it was wrong, and I'm truly sorry for the way I treated Matthew. It took me a while to see just how deeply my words and actions had hurt him, but now that I do, I feel this overwhelming regret. But I'm not sure how to go about it. How do I approach him after everything that's happened? How do I convince him that I've changed and that I'm committed to making things better? I want to show him that I understand the gravity of what I did and that I'm willing to work on myself and our relationship. I want to prove to him that I can be a better partner and that I'm capable of treating him with the respect and love he deserves. I'm turning to Reddit because I need advice. I need to hear from people who might have been in a similar situation or who have insights into how to make amends in a relationship. I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, there's a chance to repair the damage I've done. I want to find a way to communicate my regret and show Matthew that I'm serious about making things right. Any advice or suggestions on how to approach this would be greatly appreciated. Update. Hey Reddit, so it's me and I'm here with a bit of an update. Despite the harsh feedback I've received, I found this place somewhat helpful for venting, so I think I'll continue updating here, especially until I resolve things with my husband. Today, we finally managed to get in touch. Matthew reached out because he wanted to see our child. I took the opportunity to try and talk things over, but at first he was pretty distant. He took our kid to the park and I tagged along. We watched our child play from a distance and eventually we had a long conversation. During our talk, Matthew opened up about how my words had made him feel insecure and chipped away at his self-esteem. He said that my constant teasing and harsh remarks had made him feel like less of a man. I apologized. I tried that I thought I was just joking and didn't realize the impact my words were having. Matthew pointed out that if I had truly meant well, I would have stopped when he first expressed how hurtful my comments were. He admitted that he had hoped I would change and that he should have left sooner, but he kept holding out hope that things would get better. I was on the verge of tears, but I tried to hold back because we were in a public place. Matthew told me he didn't see himself coming back home or getting back together. He said that even the thought of returning to our home and back to me felt frightening to him, which made him realize how serious he was about wanting a divorce. I was devastated and tried to argue. I told him it was wrong for him to make this decision based on some mere words, but he just shut down. No matter how much I apologized or pleaded, he remained silent and continued to watch our child play. Matthew promised he would come back the next day, and he did. He's been visiting regularly after work on his days off to see our kid. Our child has asked him why he isn't staying at home anymore, and Matthew has just explained that he's busy and that things will get better soon. I thought that after some time, Matthew might reconsider and realize he doesn't want a divorce, but it's becoming clearer that he's set on it. So I reached out to my parents and in-laws and asked for their help in talking to Matthew. They've all promised to try and mediate. My mother-in-law, in particular, is upset about the divorce. She's very religious and doesn't believe in divorce at all. She mentioned she couldn't believe Matthew would want to end things over some words, and said she would definitely talk to him. I'm hopeful that her influence might make a difference since Matthew really loves and respects her, and will most likely listen to her. I'll keep updating as things progress. Using Reddit as a sounding board has been helpful, even with the negative comments and DMs. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I just need to vent a bit about how my life is turning to shit so quick. A lot of you pointed out that trying to use Matthew's mom to change his mind was manipulative. And yeah, I get it now. I was desperate and didn't know what else to do, so I thought I'd try anything. But as it turns out, that backfired spectacularly. Matthew got really upset with his mom. According to her, he even threatened to cut off contact with her if she brought up the topic of him not getting a divorce. It's incredibly frustrating because I thought she'd be able to talk some sense into him, especially since she's so opposed to divorce. But apparently she's more afraid of Matthew's anger than she is of her own principles. Now she's telling me to just accept the divorce and move on, saying it's all my fault. It feels like such a betrayal. My parents also tried to step in, but Matthew was even less patient with them than he was with his mom. So, that attempt hit a dead end too. I feel like I've exhausted every option available to me and it's overwhelming. I'm at my wit's end and don't know what to do next. I keep wondering if there's anything left to salvage or if I've just played all my cards. It's like I'm stuck in a no-win situation, and the more I try to fix things, the more I feel like I'm making them worse. I just don't know where to turn anymore. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I feel like I need to vent because I'm so exhausted and honestly at my wit's end. First off, if you've noticed I haven't updated in a while, it's because life has been incredibly hectic. I've been trying to manage things on my own, and I'm not sure if Matthew will ever forgive me. I've even been served divorce papers, so it's really sinking in that this isn't just a temporary phase. Here's what's been going on. After everything went down, I realized I couldn't just sit around waiting for Matthew to come around. I had to get up and deal with reality. I fell back into my routine of handling the house. Previously, I spent so many hours crying, and I would only get out of bed to take care of our kid. But I knew I had to pull myself together. I've been sorting out the logistics, like figuring out how I'm going to manage the lease on my own. It looks like moving back in with my parents might be the only option. They're supportive and willing to help, which is a huge relief, but I still worry about the environment my child would be in. Then today, I got served with the official divorce papers. Honestly, I felt numb when it happened. I didn't cry immediately. It was like I was in a state of shock. The tears came later, but in that moment, it was just a surreal feeling. It's clear now that this is really happening. Matthew isn't going to magically change his mind and come back. He's determined to move forward, and the worst part is he wants custody of our child. I'm torn about this. I don't want to give him custody, but I've been thinking about it deeply. If I move back with my parents, I don't want my child growing up in an environment similar to the one I did. My parents aren't bad people, but I worry about the long-term impact on my child. To add salt to the wound, Matthew recently got a big promotion. For years, I supported him, and he never got a promotion like this. But now that we're apart, his salary has reportedly almost tripled. It feels like a cruel joke. I don't want to come off as a gold digger, but it's so hard not to feel angry and frustrated. All those years of supporting him, and now that we're not together, he's thriving professionally. It's as if I was the bad luck that held him back. I'm overwhelmed. It feels like I'm juggling too many issues at once, and I don't know how to handle it all. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Sorry for the radio silence. The past few weeks have been incredibly hectic and emotionally draining. Here's a bit of an update on where things stand in my life. First off, I managed to break my lease, which was no easy feat. My landlord was a real pain to deal with, but I finally got out of there. I moved back in with my parents, which has been a major adjustment. Before I made the move, I had to make the tough decision to drop off our son at Matthew's place. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It felt like tearing a piece of my heart out. But after a lot of thought, I realized that I definitely don't want my child growing up in the same environment that I did. I'm not sure when I'll get a job or how I'll manage to be financially stable enough to move out on my own. The job market is pretty rough right now, and I haven't worked in a while, so things look pretty bleak at the moment. I didn't want my child caught in the crossfire of that instability, so it seemed best to let him stay with Matthew, who can provide a more stable environment. Speaking of Matthew, he's doing incredibly well professionally. I recently learned from a mutual friend of ours that he's bought a new house, a house that would have been way beyond our budget when we were together. Like, I swear it's so hard not to feel like I was somehow the bad luck that held him back. On the plus side, at least I know our child will be comfortable and well taken care of. Matthew's doing well and can provide a good home for him. Matthew wasn't even surprised when I accepted for him to have custody. He's aware of my background and how difficult it was growing up. He knows how much I hated that environment, and that I'd do anything to avoid putting my child through something similar. As for me, living with my parents has been challenging. They're not bad people, but they can be quite frustrating, and I really didn't want to come back here. It's not ideal, but it's the best I could manage under the circumstances. So, that's where things stand for now. Matthew's thriving, I'm trying to navigate life with my parents, and I'm still figuring out the next steps for myself. I don't have a lot more to update on at the moment, but I'll let you know if anything significant changes. Update. Hey Reddit, sorry for the radio silence. I've been adjusting to life back at my parents' house, which is something I genuinely never imagined would happen, especially at my age. I thought I'd left this place behind for good, but here I am. As promised, I wanted to update you on the major developments. The divorce is final, and unfortunately, the process was as cut and dry as it gets. No major complications, thankfully, and no assets to split. There wasn't much to fight over. I didn't qualify for any spousal support, which is a real blow since I could have used the financial help. Matthew got full custody of our child, and I've been granted visitation rights. He's generously said he'll hold off on child support for now, which is a relief. But once I find a job, I'll be expected to start contributing. The whole process was straightforward, since we had already agreed on custody arrangements before the divorce proceedings began. So there wasn't much to contest. Even though it's over, I'm left feeling like I'm stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from. This isn't how I envisioned my life. This was supposed to be the person I'd spend my life with, and now he's just part of the past. And now I'm back at my parents' place, which is like a huge step backward. My parents are upset with me for not fighting harder for custody, which has made things awkward between us. I don't regret my decision, though. I still believe that leaving our child with Matthew was the right choice, given everything. It's hard, and there are days when I struggle to find the motivation to keep going, but thinking about my child keeps me going. They're the one positive thing in my life right now. So that's where I am. I appreciate the supportive comments and DMs I've received. They've meant a lot to me, even if they've been few. I need to focus on the next steps, job searching and finding a way to move out of my parents' house. I probably won't be updating as often because I want to put all my energy into finding a job and rebuilding my life. Thanks for sticking with me through this.